We have confirmation on the clearing. It spells case 0.
Acknowledged. Continue search pattern.
They train others to survive. They carry the radios. They know the protocols. They have walked the terrain 1,000 times. They are the ones who find the lost and rescue the injured and recover the dead. And they vanish anyway. This is case 0. In 2019, a search and rescue coordinator with 23 years of experience walked away from his command post during an active search operation in the Cascade Range. He left his radio on a stump. He left his GPS on a flat rock beside the radio. He left his SAR vest folded neatly on the ground. He walked approximately 400 yards through dense forest to a creek that he had crossed on foot at least 200 times during previous operations in that drainage. His scent ended at the water. He was coordinating the search for a missing day hiker. He had deployed 3 field teams. He was in radio contact with all of them. He was running the operation from a staging area he had used dozens of times. Then he walked to the creek and did not come back. The search for the original missing hiker was suspended. The search shifted to the coordinator. 14 days, 87 personnel, dogs, helicopters, dive teams. Nothing. The creek was 18 inches deep. You could see every stone on the bottom. Neither person was ever found. I have spent 3 years investigating a pattern that does not appear in any official database, a pattern involving the people who are supposed to be immune to wilderness disappearance, the trained, the equipped, the experienced, the professionals whose job is to find others, park rangers, search and rescue volunteers, wilderness EMTs, trail crew supervisors, backcountry patrol officers, the people who carry maps because they made the maps, the people who know the terrain because they maintain the terrain, the people who respond when others go missing. I began this investigation after reading about the disappearance of Randy Morganson. Randy Morganson was a backcountry ranger in Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks for 28 years. He knew the Sierra Nevada high country better than almost anyone alive. He had walked every trail, climbed every pass, camped at every lake in his patrol area. In July of 1996, he left his patrol cabin on a routine circuit and never returned. His body was not found for 5 years. When searchers finally located his remains in 2001, they were in a steep drainage that Randy had traveled many times, in terrain that should not have presented any challenge to a ranger of his experience. The circumstances of Randy Morganson's disappearance have never been fully explained. The official conclusion was that he suffered an accident, but the details do not support a clean narrative. A man who knew the terrain intimately, who had survived decades of backcountry work, who understood the risks better than anyone, walked into country he knew and did not come out. Randy Morganson's case is publicly documented. His story was told in a book, and he became, in some ways, a symbol of the risks that backcountry rangers accept. But his case is not unique. His case is part of a pattern that I have spent 3 years documenting. 19 cases in my files involve SAR personnel or Park Service employees who vanished while on duty, or in areas where they had extensive professional experience. 19 trained professionals who disappeared under circumstances that their training should have prevented. The number is significant because the denominator is small. There are approximately 22,000 Park Service employees in the United States. There are approximately 150,000 active SAR volunteers across all jurisdictions. The total population of wilderness professionals is small compared to the millions of recreational visitors who enter wilderness each year. Yet 19 of them have disappeared in circumstances that match the pattern I have been documenting. 19 people who knew the protocols, carried the equipment, and understood the risks better than anyone. The ratio is wrong. If wilderness disappearance were purely a function of inexperience and poor preparation, professionals should be almost immune. They are not. They disappear at rates that suggest their expertise provides no protection whatsoever. I will present 11 cases in detail, not the most dramatic, the best documented. Cases where the professional credentials are verifiable, where the evidence was thoroughly collected, where the experience level of the missing person can be established beyond doubt. Every case involves someone who should not have disappeared, someone with training, someone with equipment, someone who had walked the exact terrain before, and every case contains an element that the official explanation cannot accommodate, a detail that does not fit, a pattern that connects to other patterns I have documented. The people who search are becoming the people who vanish. August 2004, Sequoia National Forest, California. Daniel Kowalski was 47 years old. He had been a wilderness ranger for the Forest Service for 19 years. He joined the service at 28 after working as a wilderness guide in Montana for 6 years. He held certifications in wilderness first response, technical rope rescue, swiftwater rescue, and avalanche safety. He had participated in over 300 search and rescue operations across the Sierra Nevada. His district covered approximately 160,000 acres of backcountry terrain, ranging from low-elevation oak woodland to alpine granite above 11,000 feet. He knew every major drainage, every trail junction, every seasonal creek crossing. He had written portions of the district's emergency response manual. He had trained the trainers. Daniel was the ranger that other rangers called when situations became complicated. He was the expert's expert, the person who had seen everything and knew how to handle everything. On August 11th, Daniel left the Hume Lake Ranger Station at 5:30 in the morning for a routine backcountry patrol. His assigned route was a loop through the Monarch Wilderness that he had completed at least 40 times during his career. The route covered approximately 18 miles of maintained trail and required fording several seasonal creeks. He carried standard backcountry patrol equipment, radio with spare battery, GPS with the route preloaded, first aid kit, fire shelter, water filter, emergency rations for 48 hours, bear spray, everything by the book. He radioed at 8:15 from Mitchell Peak, approximately 7 miles into the route. Standard check-in. No issues. Weather clear. Trail conditions good. He planned to complete the loop and return to his vehicle by 4 in the afternoon. He radioed again at 11:40 from Deer Cove, approximately 12 miles in. Still no issues. He had encountered 2 backpacking groups and 1 solo hiker. All permits verified. No violations observed. He was on schedule. His tone was normal. His voice was calm. Nothing in either radio transmission suggested anything unusual. He did not radio at his 2 o'clock check-in. By 3:30, the district supervisor had dispatched a second ranger to the route. By 5 o'clock, a full search was underway. They found his vehicle at the trailhead. They found his patrol log clipped to the dashboard, entries complete through his 11:40 radio call. They found his personal water bottle in the driver's side door pocket, half full. They did not find Daniel Kowalski for 3 days. His body was discovered on August 14th, approximately 1 mile off the maintained trail, in a drainage that wasn't part of his assigned route. He was seated against a large Jeffrey pine, legs extended, hands resting on his thighs. His ranger hat was in his lap. His radio was on a flat rock approximately 4 feet to his left. His GPS was beside the radio. His day pack was leaning against the tree behind him. His boots were placed beside his feet, side by side, approximately 6 inches from his toes. The laces were loosened, but not removed from the eyelets. The coroner ruled the death inconclusive. No trauma, no sign of animal attack, no indication of medical emergency. Toxicology was negative. Daniel Kowalski was in excellent physical condition for his age. He had passed a comprehensive physical examination 3 months before his death. The autopsy found no cause of death. His heart was healthy. His lungs were clear. His brain showed no abnormalities. Every organ functioned properly until they all stopped functioning at the same time. The medical examiner told investigators that in 32 years of forensic work, he had seen exactly 3 cases where a healthy adult died without apparent cause. All 3 were wilderness deaths. All 3 were found in seated positions with their belongings arranged around them. He did not elaborate on what he meant by this. He noted it in the file and declined to discuss it further. The location of the body is what does not fit. Daniel's assigned route followed maintained trail for its entire 18-mile loop. The drainage where his body was found was 1 mile off trail, through dense manzanita brush that would require deliberate navigation to penetrate. There was no trail to the drainage. There was no view from the maintained route that would draw attention to the drainage. There was no reason for a ranger on routine patrol to leave the trail and bushwhack through difficult terrain to reach a location with no access, no view, and no features of interest, except one feature: a dry creek bed, a seasonal drainage that carried water during spring snowmelt and was bone dry by August. Rocks and dust and dead leaves in a shallow depression cutting through the hillside. His GPS track data showed that he left the trail at approximately 1:15 in the afternoon. The track showed him walking directly toward the drainage, not wandering, not searching for something. A straight line from the trail to the location where he was found. The track showed him stopping at the Jeffrey Pine at approximately 1:40. The track showed no movement after that. He walked to that spot and sat down, and did not move again. The GPS continued recording for 11 hours until the battery died. 11 hours of no movement. Daniel sat against that tree as the sun went down, as darkness fell, as the night passed, as the sun rose the following morning. He sat there while his colleagues searched for him less than a mile away. His radio had battery remaining. He could have called for help. He did not. His emergency beacon was in his pack. He did not activate it. He sat under that tree and let whatever was happening to him happen. I visited the site in September of 2022. I had obtained the GPS coordinates from a retired Forest Service supervisor who remembered the case and was willing to share the file after considerable hesitation. He told me the case had bothered him for 18 years. He told me Daniel Kowalski was not the type of person who made mistakes. He told me the official explanation, which amounted to unknown medical event, satisfied no one who had known Daniel. The drainage is unremarkable. A shallow cut in the hillside. No distinctive features. No view. No sound of water, because there is no water. Just a dry creek bed surrounded by manzanita and scattered Jeffrey pines. I found the tree where Daniel Kowalski sat down and didn't get up. The tree had no markings. The ground showed no sign that anyone had died there 18 years earlier. The forest had absorbed the event and continued as if nothing had happened. I sat where Daniel sat. I looked at what he would have seen: brush and trees and sky, the dry creek bed curving down the hillside. Nothing else. I stayed for approximately 30 minutes. I felt nothing unusual. The forest was quiet in the way that Sierra forests are quiet in late summer. No wind, no water, no sound except occasional birds. But I noticed something that wasn't in the official file. The dry creek bed had rocks arranged in a pattern. Not obviously, not in a way that would be visible from a distance. But when I walked the creek bed, looking for any sign of what might have drawn Daniel to this location, I noticed that certain rocks were placed rather than naturally positioned. They formed a line. Approximately 12 rocks, each about the size of a fist, placed in a row along the center of the creek bed. The line pointed up the drainage toward a saddle in the hillside above. I do not know what this means. The rocks could have been placed by anyone at any time. They could have been there before Daniel arrived or placed after he died. They could be unrelated to his death, but they were there. A line of placed rocks in the exact drainage where a 19-year veteran ranger walked away from his patrol route and died without apparent cause. His former supervisor told me that Daniel had mentioned the drainage approximately 2 weeks before his death. During a staff meeting about backcountry fire conditions, Daniel had noted that he wanted to check a drainage off the Deer Cove section of trail because he had seen smoke in that direction from Mitchell Peak. The supervisor checked the fire records. There were no fire reports from that drainage. There was no smoke observed by any lookout station. No other ranger reported seeing anything unusual. Daniel saw smoke that was not there. 2 weeks later, he walked to the source of the smoke that was not there and sat down and did not get up. The supervisor does not know what this means. The supervisor told me he has stopped trying to understand it. Understanding would require a framework that does not exist. Daniel Kowalski remains the only person in Forest Service records for that district who left a maintained trail, walked a straight line to an undistinguished location, and died there without apparent cause. He did not fall. He did not drown. He did not suffer a heart attack or stroke. He sat down under a tree and stopped living. The forest took him. That is the phrase his former colleagues use. Not officially. Not in reports. In private conversations when they talk about cases that do not fit. The forest took him. They cannot define what this means. They only know that it happened. March 2007. Olympic National Park, Washington. Lisa Chen was 34 years old. She had been a backcountry ranger for the National Park Service for 8 years. Before joining the Park Service, she had worked as a wilderness guide in Alaska for 4 summers, leading groups through some of the most remote terrain in North America. She held advanced certifications in wilderness medicine, ice rescue, and search management. She had participated in over 150 search and rescue operations. Her assigned patrol area was the High Divide, a remote alpine ridge on the western side of Olympic National Park, accessible only by extended backpack or cross-country ski travel. She knew the terrain in all seasons. She had camped at every designated site in her patrol area. She had walked every mile of trail and many miles of cross-country route that only rangers used. Lisa was known for her calm under pressure. Her colleagues described her as unflappable. In emergency situations, her heart rate dropped rather than spiked. She processed crises analytically, breaking problems into components and solving them systematically. She was the person you wanted coordinating your rescue if you were injured in the backcountry. On March 15th, Lisa left the Salduke Ranger Station for a 3-day ski patrol of the High Divide. Snow conditions were stable. Weather forecast was clear. She was an expert backcountry skier who had completed the same patrol dozens of times. She carried avalanche rescue equipment even though the avalanche risk was low. She carried emergency shelter even though she planned to camp in a patrol cabin. She carried backup communication even though her primary radio was reliable. She took no chances. She never had. She radioed from Heart Lake at 6:30 in the evening on March 15th. Normal conditions. Good snow. Camping at the designated site. She would radio again the following morning. She did not radio on March 16th. By mid-afternoon, a helicopter was dispatched to search the route. The pilot located her tent at Heart Lake at approximately 3:30. The tent was properly set up. Her skis were planted in the snow beside the entrance. Her pack was inside. Her sleeping bag was unrolled. Her ski boots were inside the tent, placed neatly beside her sleeping pad. Her liner socks were inside the boots. Lisa Chen was not at the camp. Her tracks led from the tent approximately 200 yards to the frozen shore of Heart Lake. The tracks stopped at the ice edge. The lake was frozen solid. Ice thickness measured over 20 inches. A person could have walked across the lake without risk of breakthrough, but her tracks did not cross the lake. They stopped at the edge. Dogs could not track on frozen snow. The search expanded to cover all possible routes from the lake. 23 days. Over 200 personnel across multiple operational periods, helicopters, ground teams, technical teams checking cliffs and crevasses. The search covered every conceivable scenario. She might have fallen through weak ice and been trapped. Divers checked. The ice was solid throughout, and the lake bottom was visible in the shallow areas. She was not in the lake. She might have become disoriented and wandered. Search dogs covered the surrounding terrain. No scent detected beyond the lake shore. She might have been attacked by wildlife. The snow showed only her tracks. No animal prints. No sign of struggle. Lisa Chen was never found. Her tent contained her journal. The last entry was dated March 15th, written by headlamp after dinner. The entry documented her ski-in, the snow conditions, the wildlife she observed. Standard Ranger Journal entries that she had written hundreds of times before. The final paragraph was different. She wrote that Heart Lake was louder than usual. She wrote that she could hear something under the ice. Not cracking. Not settling. Something moving. She wrote that the sound reminded her of breathing. Slow breathing. Like something very large was asleep beneath the frozen surface. She wrote that she knew this was probably ice expansion making sounds as temperatures dropped after sunset. She wrote that the scientific explanation was obvious. Then she wrote that she wanted to go to the shore and listen. That was the last line. She wanted to go to the shore and listen. Then she removed her ski boots and walked barefoot through the snow to the frozen lake. Snow temperature that night was approximately 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Walking barefoot through snow at that temperature would cause frostbite within minutes. Lisa Chen was a wilderness medicine expert. She knew exactly what cold did to exposed flesh. She had treated frostbite cases. She had amputated frostbitten tissue in emergency situations. She walked barefoot to the lake anyway. Her tracks in the snow showed no hesitation, no wandering, no signs of confusion or distress. Steady footprints from the tent to the shore. A person walking with purpose to a specific destination. The ice where her tracks ended was intact. No hole, no crack, no weakness that would have allowed her to fall through. The ice was solid. She walked to the edge of the frozen lake, and then she was not there anymore. I spoke with a ranger who had worked with Lisa for 5 years. He requested anonymity because he still works for the Park Service, and the case remains officially unsolved. He told me Lisa had mentioned Heart Lake several times in the months before her disappearance. She had wintered there before, multiple times, but during that winter, she mentioned it more frequently. She told him the lake sounded different when it was frozen. She told him she could hear something under the ice that she had not heard before. He asked her what she meant. She told him she did not know. She told him it was probably ice settling or expanding, normal sounds. But she kept coming back to it. She kept mentioning the sound. She told him once that the sound was almost like a voice, not words, not language, but something communicating, something under the ice trying to be heard. He told her she was spending too much time alone in the backcountry. He told her isolation could play tricks on perception. She agreed. She laughed about it. She told him he was probably right, but she kept mentioning the sound. He told me he now wishes he had asked more questions. He wishes he had taken her observations seriously, rather than dismissing them as routine backcountry conversation. He wishes he had told her not to camp at Heart Lake alone that winter. He knows none of this would have changed anything. Lisa Chen was an expert. She made her own decisions. She chose to ski to Heart Lake, and she chose to walk to the shore, and nothing would have stopped her. But he thinks about it. Years later, he still thinks about it. The sound under the ice. The something that was breathing. The ranger who walked barefoot through the snow to listen. The lake is still there. It still freezes every winter. Rangers still ski past it on patrol. They do not camp there anymore. The designated campsite at Heart Lake has been removed from the patrol rotation. The official reason is budget constraints. The actual reason is that no ranger will sleep there. They can still hear it. Some of them. The breathing under the ice. The voice that is not a voice. The sound that Lisa Chen walked barefoot through the snow to listen to. They do not walk to the shore. They ski past as quickly as they can, and they do not look back. October 2011. North Cascades National Park, Washington. Marcus Rivera was 52 years old. He had been a search and rescue volunteer for 26 years, beginning when he was 26 years old and newly graduated from paramedic training. Over his career, he had participated in over 400 search and rescue operations across Washington state. He had been a team leader for 15 years. He had trained hundreds of new volunteers. He was considered one of the most experienced SAR volunteers in the Pacific Northwest. His technical skills were exceptional. His decision-making under pressure was legendary among his peers. He had received multiple commendations for operations where his leadership had directly contributed to successful rescues. On October 8th, Marcus was deployed as team leader for a search operation in the Cascade River drainage. A backpacker had been reported overdue after failing to return from a solo trip to a lake at approximately 5,000 feet. The search had been active for 2 days when Marcus arrived to take over command of the field operations. Marcus established his command post at a trail junction approximately 3 miles from the reported destination of the missing backpacker. He deployed 2 field teams to conduct grid searches of the drainage. He maintained radio contact with both teams. He coordinated with the helicopter support that was conducting aerial reconnaissance. At approximately 2:30 in the afternoon, Marcus radioed to both field teams that he was relocating his command post approximately half a mile to the west to improve radio coverage. This was standard practice. Command posts are moved during operations when terrain interferes with communications. Both field teams acknowledged. At 3:15, Field Team 1 attempted to contact Marcus for a status update. No response. At 3:20, Field Team 2 attempted contact. No response. Both teams attempted contact every 5 minutes for the next half hour. No response. By 4 o'clock, the field teams had converged on the location where Marcus had been positioned. They found his command post equipment arranged on a flat rock outcrop. His radio was on the rock. His GPS was beside the radio. His SAR vest was folded on the ground. His daypack was leaning against a small boulder. His boots were beside the pack, side by side. Laces loosened. His tracks led from the command post approximately 60 yards through subalpine forest to a creek. The creek was a tributary of the Cascade River, running approximately 10 feet wide over rounded stones. The water was clear. The depth was less than 2 feet. His tracks ended at the creek bank. The search for the original missing backpacker was immediately suspended. All resources were redirected to finding Marcus Rivera. 19 days. Over 200 personnel. Dogs, helicopters, dive teams, technical rescue teams checking every terrain feature within a 5-mile radius. Neither Marcus Rivera nor the original missing backpacker was ever found. The original backpacker was a 31-year-old software developer from Seattle who had visited the destination lake once before, approximately 2 years earlier. He was an experienced hiker, but not a technical climber or wilderness expert. His scent had also ended at water, approximately 1 mile upstream from where Marcus would later vanish. 2 people, 2 separate searches, both scent trails ending at water. Both bodies never recovered. The timing is notable. The original backpacker disappeared on October 6th. Marcus Rivera disappeared on October 10th. 4 days apart, same drainage, both scent trails ending in the same creek system. Marcus Rivera was one of the most experienced SAR personnel in the region. He had trained others in how to avoid becoming a victim during search operations. He had written safety protocols. He had lectured on situational awareness. He walked to a creek and didn't come back. 4 days after the person he was searching for walked to the same creek system and did not come back. I interviewed Marcus's wife through a mutual contact who had worked SAR operations with Marcus for over a decade. She agreed to speak on condition that I not identify her or provide details that would allow identification. She told me Marcus had been having dreams about water in the weeks before the October operation. He would wake at night and tell her he had been dreaming about a creek, always the same creek, running over stones, clear water. He could see the bottom. He could hear the water moving. She asked him if he recognized the creek. He told her he did not. He told her he had never seen it before, but it felt familiar. It felt like somewhere he was supposed to go. She told him dreams were just dreams. Stress, the pressure of constant SAR deployments, the accumulated weight of seeing what happens when searches fail. He agreed. He dismissed the dreams as stress. He deployed to the October operation as scheduled. The creek where his tracks ended matches the creek from his dreams. Running over stones, clear water. You could see the bottom. You could hear the water moving. She knows this because she visited the site, alone, approximately 1 year after Marcus disappeared. She stood where his tracks ended. She looked at the creek. She recognized it, not from ever having been there, from his descriptions, from what he told her about the dream. He dreamed about the creek before he ever saw it. Then he saw it and walked to it and did not come back. She does not understand how this is possible. She does not have a framework for understanding. She only knows what happened. June 2014. Glacier National Park, Montana. Thomas Brennan was 41 years old. He had been a law enforcement ranger for the National Park Service for 14 years. Before joining the Park Service, he had served 6 years as a military police officer in the United States Army, including deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. He had seen combat. He had handled high-stress situations. He was trained to remain calm under pressure. He was trained in tactical operations, evidence collection, backcountry law enforcement, and emergency response. He carried a service weapon. He wore a body camera during all patrol operations per Park Service protocol. He had extensive experience with the difficult terrain of the northern Rocky Mountains. His colleagues described him as unshakable, the ranger who never panicked, the one who stayed calm when grizzly bears approached campsites, when tourists did dangerous things, when emergencies unfolded in remote backcountry. Thomas Brennan was the steady hand, the professional. On June 23rd, Thomas was conducting a solo patrol of the Bowman Lake area in the northwestern section of Glacier National Park. The area is remote, accessible only by a long, unpaved road, and sees relatively few visitors compared to the eastern sections of the park. Thomas had patrolled the Bowman Lake area dozens of times. He knew every trail, every creek crossing, every bear travel corridor. He had camped at every backcountry site in the drainage. This was routine work in a familiar place. He radioed from the Bowman Lake trailhead at 7:15 in the morning. Beginning patrol. Planned route was the Bowman Lake Trail to the upper lake and return. Estimated return by 4 in the afternoon. His voice on the radio was normal, steady, professional, nothing unusual. He radioed from the upper lake at 11:30. Normal conditions. No visitors observed. Planning to eat lunch and return. Still normal. Still steady. He did not radio again. By 6 o'clock, a search was underway. Rangers drove to the trailhead and found his patrol vehicle parked in the lot. They hiked the trail in failing light and found no sign of him. The following morning, search teams located his body camera approximately 3 miles from the upper lake, on a section of trail that descends through dense coniferous forest. The camera was on a flat rock beside the trail. It was off. The battery had died. His radio was beside the camera. His GPS was beside the radio. His service weapon was holstered on his duty belt, which was coiled on the rock beside the other equipment. His boots were on the trail, side by side. Laces loosened, but still threaded through the eyelets. Dogs tracked his scent from the boots approximately 80 yards through dense forest to a creek. The creek was a tributary of Bowman Creek, running clear and cold over a gravel bed. The depth was approximately 18 inches. Thomas Brennan's scent ended at the creek bank. The search lasted 12 days. Over 150 personnel, dogs, helicopters, dive teams, mounted patrol units checking remote sections of trail, bear teams with darted rifles in case a grizzly had cached remains somewhere. Nothing was found. Thomas Brennan was never found. His body camera footage was recovered and reviewed by investigators. The footage showed normal patrol activity through the morning. Thomas hiked the trail. He stopped to photograph wildlife. He checked backcountry permits. He ate lunch at the upper lake, sitting on a rock overlooking the water, reviewing paperwork on his clipboard. He looked relaxed, happy even. The footage shows a man enjoying his work on a beautiful day. He began his return hike at approximately 12:30. The footage showed him walking the descent trail. He passed the same terrain features that would later be searched. He looked normal. His pace was steady. His body language showed no distress. The footage is boring. That is what the investigators noted. Routine patrol footage. A ranger walking a trail. Nothing notable. Nothing alarming. Until 1:45. At approximately 1:45, the footage shows Thomas stopping abruptly on the trail. He stands still for approximately 8 seconds, looking into the forest to his right. The camera does not show what he is looking at. The camera points where Thomas points it, and Thomas is looking somewhere the camera is not capturing. The forest in that direction appears normal. Trees and undergrowth and shadow. Nothing visible that would explain why a ranger would stop and stare. Then Thomas says one word. The audio pickup is clear. He says hello. The investigators enhanced the audio. They analyzed the sound. They confirmed that Thomas Brennan, 14-year law enforcement veteran, said hello to something in the forest. His tone was not alarmed, not curious, not surprised. His tone was recognition, as if he was greeting someone he knew, someone he expected to see. He waits approximately 4 seconds after saying hello. The camera stays pointed at the trail. Whatever Thomas is seeing remains off-frame. Then he removes his duty belt and places it on the ground. The belt contains his service weapon, his radio, his handcuffs, his flashlight. He places it carefully, not dropping it, setting it down. He removes his radio and places it on a flat rock. He removes his GPS and places it beside the radio. He kneels and removes his boots and places them beside his feet. The footage shows his hands. Steady. No trembling. No hesitation. He is removing his equipment with the same deliberate care that he would use during any routine task. Then he stands and walks into the forest. The camera, still clipped to his uniform, shows trees passing, undergrowth, the forest floor. For approximately 2 minutes, the camera records Thomas walking through dense timber toward the creek. His pace is steady, not hurrying, not hesitating, walking with purpose toward a specific destination. The footage ends when the camera is removed and placed on the ground. The final frame shows Thomas's hand setting the camera down, his fingers pressing the power button. Then the recording stops. He turned the camera off. He did not want what came next to be recorded. Investigators have no footage of Thomas reaching the creek. They have no footage of what he saw there. They have no footage of what happened after he walked away from his camera. They have only the hello and the deliberate decision to stop recording before he reached the water. The investigation file contains a note from the lead investigator, a detective with the Park Service who had worked law enforcement in national parks for 22 years. The note is not part of the official findings. It is a personal observation appended to the file. The note states that in 22 years of law enforcement investigation, he has never seen a missing person remove recording equipment before disappearing. In every other case where a person deliberately disappears, whether suicide or voluntary missing or criminal disappearance, they either forget about the camera or do not care about the footage. Thomas Brennan cared. He specifically removed the camera and turned it off before reaching the creek. He did not want whatever was about to happen to be recorded. The detective has seen criminals disable surveillance. He has seen suspects destroy evidence. He has never seen a missing person choose privacy before vanishing. The note asks a question that the detective does not answer. What did Thomas Brennan see that he did not want anyone else to see? What was in the forest? What was waiting at the creek? The investigator's note ends with a single sentence. He writes that he does not know what Thomas saw. He writes that he does not want to know. I spoke with Thomas's wife through an intermediary. She declined a direct interview, but provided written responses to questions I submitted. She told me Thomas had mentioned the Bowman Lake area several times in the weeks before his disappearance. Not complaints, not concerns, just mentions. He told her the forest there was old. He told her it felt different from other parts of the park. She asked him what he meant. He told her he was not sure. He told her sometimes when he patrolled there alone, he felt like someone was walking with him, not following, walking with, keeping pace just out of sight. She asked if he felt threatened. He told her no. He told her whatever it was felt familiar, like meeting someone you had known before but could not quite remember. She told him he should request a different patrol area if the location made him uncomfortable. He told her he did not want to request a different area. He told her the feeling was not bad, just different, interesting. He returned to patrol the Bowman Lake area because he wanted to, because whatever was there interested him, because the familiar presence that walked with him felt like someone he was supposed to meet. She does not know what he met. She only knows he greeted something with hello. And then he walked to the creek and did not come back. April 2017. Grand Canyon National Park, Arizona. Sarah Mitchell was 28 years old. She had been a wilderness EMT and search and rescue volunteer for 6 years. She had trained as a paramedic before transitioning to wilderness medicine. She held certifications in technical rope rescue, helicopter operations, and swift water rescue. She had participated in over 200 rescue operations in the Grand Canyon and surrounding terrain. The Grand Canyon presented unique challenges that Sarah had mastered. Extreme heat that could kill an unprepared hiker in hours. Limited water sources that required meticulous planning. Vertical terrain that demanded technical skills most rescuers never develop. Evacuation distances measured in miles of brutal elevation change. She understood the canyon better than most rangers. She had descended and ascended the most technical routes. She knew where people got in trouble. She knew where people died. She had carried bodies out of drainages so remote that no casual visitor would ever see them. Her colleagues described her as fearless in the canyon. Not reckless, fearless. She understood the risks and accepted them. She descended into places that other SAR personnel declined to go. She did the difficult extractions, the technical rescues, the body recoveries in terrain that seemed designed to kill anyone who entered. On April 19th, Sarah was deployed as part of a search team looking for a missing hiker who had last been seen on the South Kaibab Trail 3 days earlier. The hiker was a 42-year-old accountant from Phoenix who had attempted an ambitious day hike and failed to return. The search had been extended due to the size of the terrain and the possibility that the missing hiker had attempted an off-trail route. Sarah's assignment was to search a drainage that descended from the Tonto platform toward the Colorado River. The drainage was not a maintained route. It required technical scrambling and route-finding skills. The sandstone was polished by seasonal flash floods. The drops ranged from manageable scrambles to vertical pour-offs that required rope. Sarah was assigned because she had descended the drainage once before, approximately 2 years earlier, during a body recovery operation. That body recovery had been difficult. A solo hiker had attempted to descend the drainage to reach the river and had fallen at a pour-off approximately halfway down. Sarah had rappelled to the body, rigged the extraction, and supervised the carryout that took 14 hours. She told her team leader at the time that she did not want to return to that drainage. She did not elaborate on why. On April 19th, she was asked to return. The missing hiker might have attempted the same route. Someone needed to check. Sarah was the only SAR volunteer who knew the drainage. She accepted the assignment. She did not refuse. She did not explain her previous reluctance. She entered the drainage at approximately 9 in the morning. She radioed from the top of the drainage, beginning descent. Would radio again from the river. Her voice was normal, professional, no indication of distress. She did not radio from the river. By 2 in the afternoon, when she had not checked in, the search coordinator dispatched another team to the drainage. They found her equipment at approximately 3:30, approximately halfway down the drainage. Her pack was propped against a boulder. Her radio was on a flat rock beside the pack. Her GPS was beside the radio. Her helmet was clipped to the pack. Her rescue harness was coiled beside the helmet. Her approach shoes were on the ground beside the pack. Side by side. Neat. The laces were still tied. She had slipped out of them without untying them. The drainage below her equipment location became increasingly technical. Dry waterfalls, vertical drops, loose rock. A person without shoes could not safely descend. The sandstone was abrasive enough to shred bare feet in minutes. The drops required either rope or extreme risk tolerance. But Sarah's tracks continued down the drainage. Barefoot tracks on sandstone. Past dry waterfalls that should have required rope. Past drops that should have required anchors. Past terrain that she herself had described as requiring technical protection. The tracks showed no blood, no scraping, no sign that her feet had been injured by the descent. She walked barefoot down polished sandstone, and her feet did not bleed. The tracks ended at a pool of stagnant water at the bottom of a pour-off. The pool was approximately 4 feet across and 2 feet deep. Brown water, thick with accumulated sediment from monsoon flash floods. The pool was searched. It was too shallow to conceal a body. Sarah Mitchell was not in the pool. The canyon below the pool was searched. Every drainage, Every side canyon, every feature that might hide, remains. Helicopters flew grid patterns. Ground teams covered every square foot of accessible terrain. Sarah Mitchell was never found. The barefoot descent through technical terrain is what investigators cannot explain. Sarah Mitchell knew that drainage. She had descended it before with full gear. She knew the technical sections. She knew the drops that required rope. She descended barefoot through terrain that should have killed her. No rope, no protection, no shoes. The tracks show no falls, no sliding, no loss of control. Steady footprints down polished sandstone through terrain that trained technical climbers approach with caution. The lead investigator consulted with a forensic podiatrist about the barefoot tracks. The podiatrist examined photographs and measurements and concluded that the tracks showed a person walking normally on difficult terrain. No favoring of one foot, no signs of pain response, no hesitation at drops. The podiatrist could not explain how this was possible. Barefoot descent through that terrain should have produced injury. It should have produced behavioral changes as the person avoided pain. It produced nothing. She walked down the drainage as if the terrain did not matter, as if gravity did not matter, as if the laws that govern human bodies in technical terrain had been temporarily suspended. Something allowed her to descend terrain that should have been impossible without equipment. Or something moved her down that terrain without requiring her to climb. I spoke with a SAR colleague who had worked with Sarah on multiple operations. He requested anonymity because he is still active in search and rescue, and the case remains a source of controversy among the SAR community. He told me Sarah had mentioned the drainage during the weeks before the operation. She had descended it once before for the body recovery. She told him she never wanted to go back. He asked why. She told him the drainage was wrong. She could not explain what she meant. The terrain was difficult, but not exceptional. The exposure was significant, but she had managed worse. Something about the place was wrong. Something about how it felt. She used the phrase "it was waiting." She told him the drainage felt like it was waiting for something. He dismissed this as normal post-traumatic response. Body recoveries are difficult. The locations become associated with death. She was processing trauma from the previous extraction. 2 years later, she was assigned to search that drainage. She could have refused. She could have cited the previous experience and requested a different assignment. She did not refuse. She accepted the assignment and descended into the place that was waiting. He told me he thinks about the phrase now. Waiting for something. The drainage was waiting. He thinks it was waiting for her. The body she had recovered 2 years earlier was never identified. A solo hiker with no identification, no permit, no vehicle located at any trailhead. A John Doe who fell while attempting to reach the river. The SAR community speculated at the time that the man might have been suicidal. Who else would attempt that drainage alone without technical equipment? Who else would descend toward the river without a plan for getting back up? 2 years later, Sarah descended the same drainage. She removed her equipment halfway down. She walked barefoot to the same pool where the unidentified man had been found. The parallel is not lost on the SAR community. The drainage that claimed the John Doe claimed Sarah Mitchell. The drainage collected them both. The investigation file notes that Sarah Mitchell requested information about the John Doe case approximately 3 weeks before her disappearance. She wanted to know if he had ever been identified. She wanted to know the exact location where his body was found. She was told the body was found at the pool at the bottom of the pour-off sequence, the same pool where her tracks ended. She walked barefoot to the place where an unidentified man had died. She walked to the place that had been waiting. She has not been found. Neither has he been identified. The drainage keeps its secrets. September 2019. Cascade Range, Washington. This is the case I mentioned at the beginning. The SAR coordinator who walked away from his own command post during an active operation. His name was Robert Vasquez. He was 51 years old. He had been involved in search and rescue for 23 years, beginning as a volunteer and eventually becoming one of the most respected SAR coordinators in Washington state. He had managed over 500 search operations. He had developed training programs used by SR teams throughout the Pacific Northwest. He had literally written the book on search management for his region. On September 14th, Robert was coordinating a search for a missing day hiker in the Cascade Range. The hiker was a 39-year-old accountant from Tacoma, who had failed to return from a solo hike to a lake at approximately 4,000 feet. The hiker had moderate experience, but was not an expert. Robert established his command post at a staging area approximately 2 miles from the last known location of the missing hiker. He deployed 3 field teams. He coordinated with aviation support. He managed communications with the incident commander at base camp. The operation was running smoothly. Robert was doing what he had done hundreds of times before, managing the search, processing information, making decisions. This was not his first multi-day search. This was not his first missing person case. This was routine work for someone of his experience. At 2:15 in the afternoon, Robert radioed the incident commander. He reported that all field teams were deployed and conducting systematic grid searches. He reported no developments. He reported that he was going to relocate approximately 50 yards to improve his radio coverage for one of the field teams that was having intermittent communication issues. The incident commander acknowledged. At 2:40, Field Team 2 attempted to contact Robert for a status update. No response. At 2:50, Field Team 3 attempted contact. No response. The incident commander attempted contact at 2:55. No response. By 3 o'clock, Field Team 1 returned to the command post location to check on the communication issue. They found Robert's equipment on a stump: radio, GPS, SAR coordinator vest folded neatly, daypack leaning against the stump. His boots were beside the daypack, side by side. Laces loosened, but still threaded through the eyelets. His socks were inside the boots. They found his tracks leading from the command post approximately 400 yards through dense forest to a creek. The creek was a tributary of the larger river system that drained the valley. 18 inches deep, clear water, visible bottom, the kind of creek you could wade across without getting your knees wet. Robert Vasquez's tracks ended at the creek bank. The team leader who found the tracks radioed the incident commander immediately. His voice on the recording is shaky. He had worked with Robert for 11 years. He knew Robert would not abandon his equipment. He knew Robert would not walk barefoot into the forest during an active operation. The search for the original missing hiker was suspended. All resources pivoted to finding Robert. 14 days, 87 personnel, dogs, helicopters, dive teams, every available resource in the region. SAR volunteers from 3 counties who knew Robert personally. Rangers from adjacent forests who had trained with Robert. The entire Pacific Northwest SAR community mobilized to find one of their own. Neither Robert Vasquez nor the original missing hiker was ever found. The original hiker's scent had also ended at water. A different creek, approximately 1 mile downstream from where Robert vanished. Same drainage system, same pattern. Both scent trails ending at shallow water, where bodies should have been visible if they were present. The connection between the 2 disappearances is something that SAR personnel discuss privately, but never officially acknowledge. Robert Vasquez was searching for someone who had vanished at water. Then Robert Vasquez walked to water and vanished the same way, as if the search had somehow connected Robert to the same process that took the hiker. Robert had managed over 500 search operations in his career. Many of those operations ended with the missing person found at water, dead from drowning, dead from exposure while trying to reach water, dead from falls near streams. Water is where people die in wilderness, but in those cases, the bodies were found. Water kills, but water does not hide what it kills. Bodies float. Bodies wash up on banks. Bodies are discovered downstream. The hiker and Robert did not wash up. They did not float downstream. They walked to shallow water, and then they were gone. I interviewed Robert's wife through a retired SAR colleague who had worked with Robert for over 15 years. She agreed to speak on condition of anonymity. She told me the interview was the first time she had talked about what happened to anyone outside her family. She told me Robert had been having trouble sleeping for approximately 2 weeks before the September operation. He would wake at night and sit in the living room, not doing anything, just sitting. When she asked him what was wrong, he told her he was thinking about water. She asked him what about water. He told her he could hear it, not from outside, not from pipes in the house. He could hear water running somewhere that was not a real place. He could hear it all the time, faint, like a radio playing in another room. He told her the sound was not unpleasant. He told her it was almost comforting, like white noise that helped him relax. But it would not stop. The sound persisted. It followed him to work. It followed him home. It was there when he woke up in the morning, and there when he went to bed at night. She told him he was stressed. Too many operations. The cumulative toll of years of SAR work. He needed rest. He agreed. He told her he would take time off after the September operation. Just one more operation, and then he would rest. The September operation was searching for someone who had disappeared at water. Robert heard water constantly for 2 weeks before the operation. Then he walked to water during the operation and didn't come back. She does not believe in coincidence. Not anymore. She told me one more thing. The night before the September operation, Robert told her that he knew where the missing hiker was. She asked how he could know. The search had not begun. He had not been to the location. He told her he could hear the water. The same water he had been hearing for 2 weeks. He told her the missing hiker was at the water. She asked if he should report this to the incident commander. He laughed. He told her it was just intuition. Years of experience creating subconscious pattern recognition. Nothing supernatural. Just his brain processing information in ways he did not consciously understand. He walked to the water he had been hearing in his head. The water that wasn't a real place became a real place. He walked there and did not come back. She does not understand. She is not asking me to explain. She only wanted to tell someone what happened before it happened. The sound of water that should not have been there. The dreams. The sitting in the dark, listening to something no one else could hear. She wanted someone to document that the end started before the end. That the water was calling him before he ever saw it. The 6 cases I have presented share a common structure. Experienced wilderness professionals with extensive training and familiarity with specific terrain walked away from equipment, removed footwear, and walked to water features where their trails ended. Daniel Kowalski saw smoke that was not there and walked to its source. Lisa Chen heard breathing under frozen water and walked barefoot through snow to listen. Marcus Rivera dreamed about a creek and then walked to the creek from his dreams. Thomas Brennan said hello to something in the forest and removed his camera before walking to the water. Sarah Mitchell descended technical terrain barefoot through a drainage that was waiting. Robert Vasquez heard water that was not a real place and walked to where the water became real. In every case, something drew their attention before it drew their bodies. They heard, they saw, they dreamed, they felt. The experience preceded the action. The water announced itself before they walked to it. This is not how wilderness accidents work. Accidents are sudden, falls, weather, wildlife, medical emergencies. Accidents do not announce themselves weeks in advance through sounds and dreams and visions. What happened to these 6 professionals is not accident. It is process. A process that begins with attention and ends with water. A process that operates on trained minds as effectively as it operates on untrained minds. A process that does not care about certifications or experience or equipment. The professionals who train others to survive in wilderness are not immune to the pattern. They are targets of the pattern. Their expertise does not protect them. Their equipment does not protect them. Their familiarity with terrain does not protect them. The terrain knows them. The terrain has watched them walk the same trails for years. The terrain has seen them respond to other disappearances. The terrain has noted their presence, and the terrain eventually calls them in. I have 5 additional cases to present. These cases have less documentation than the previous 6, but they reveal aspects of the pattern that the primary cases do not address. November 2009. Yellowstone National Park, Wyoming. Peter Danforth was 44 years old. He had been a backcountry ranger for the National Park Service for 11 years. Before joining the Park Service, he had worked as a wilderness guide in Montana for 6 summers. He knew the backcountry of Yellowstone as well as anyone alive. On November 3rd, he was conducting a late-season patrol of the Thoroughfare region, one of the most remote areas in the lower 48 states. The Thoroughfare is approximately 30 miles from the nearest road. Access requires either multi-day horseback travel or extended backpacking. Few visitors ever see it. Peter had patrolled the Thoroughfare every fall for 8 years. He knew every drainage, every creek crossing, every game trail. He knew where the elk congregated. He knew where the wolves denned. He knew the rhythms of that landscape in ways that can only come from years of intimate observation. He radioed from a patrol cabin at 3 in the afternoon. Normal check-in, planning to continue to a second cabin approximately 6 miles distant. He would arrive before dark if the weather held. His voice on the radio was normal, relaxed. The voice of a man doing work he loved in a place he loved. He did not arrive at the second cabin. His horse arrived. At approximately 7 in the evening, Peter's horse walked to the second cabin, still saddled, reins trailing. The horse was calm, not spooked, not injured, just riderless. The following morning, a search team backtracked along the route Peter should have taken. They found his equipment approximately 2 miles from the first cabin, on a bench overlooking the Yellowstone River. His pack was against a tree. His radio was on a flat rock. His rifle was leaning against the tree beside the pack, safety on, chamber clear. His horse had been tied to a low branch, but the lead rope was cut, not untied, cut with a knife. His boots were beside the pack, side by side. The laces were removed and coiled beside the boots. His tracks led from the equipment approximately 80 yards to the riverbank. The Yellowstone River at that location runs approximately 40 feet wide, deep and cold and fast-moving even in November, the kind of water that rangers warn visitors not to enter. His tracks ended at the bank. The search lasted 16 days. Dogs, helicopters, horseback teams covering both sides of the river for miles downstream. Dive teams checking every pool and eddy where a body might catch. Peter Danforth was never found. The unusual detail is the timing. Peter had radioed from the patrol cabin at 3 in the afternoon, reporting normal conditions, planning to continue to the next cabin. His equipment was found 2 miles from the first cabin, which he should have reached within 30 minutes of his radio call. 15 to 30 minutes after reporting normal conditions, Peter stopped his horse, dismounted, arranged his equipment, cut his horse loose, removed his boots and his bootlaces, and walked to the river. Something changed in that brief window, something that a veteran ranger could not resist or report. His colleagues speculate that he saw something, a wildlife emergency, an injured animal, something that required immediate response. But wildlife emergencies do not cause rangers to remove their boots. Wildlife emergencies do not cause rangers to cut their horses loose. Whatever he saw was not a wildlife emergency. Whatever he saw called him to the water. The horse that returned to the cabin was never used in backcountry service again. The rangers who worked with the horse reported that she became anxious whenever they approached the bench where Peter had stopped. She would not pass that location. She had to be led around it on a different route. Animals know things. The rangers who work in Yellowstone understand this. Horses that refuse to pass certain locations. Dogs that will not enter certain drainages. Wildlife that avoids areas that seem identical to adjacent areas. Peter's horse knew something happened on that bench. She would not go near it again. August 2012. Rocky Mountain National Park, Colorado. Jennifer Walsh was 33 years old. She had been a search and rescue volunteer for 9 years. She worked as a nurse at a hospital in Fort Collins during the week and volunteered for SAR operations on weekends and during major incidents. She was experienced and level-headed. Her medical background made her valuable on technical extractions and multi-day searches. She had participated in over 100 operations. She knew Rocky Mountain National Park well. On August 14th, she was participating in a search for a missing child in the Wild Basin area. A 5-year-old boy had wandered away from a campsite the previous evening. The search had been active for 18 hours when Jennifer joined her assigned team. She was assigned to search a creek drainage with a partner, a volunteer named Kevin, who had worked with her on multiple previous operations. They entered the drainage at approximately noon and began a systematic search, checking every pool, every overhanging rock, every feature where a child might shelter. At approximately 2 in the afternoon, they reached a section of the drainage where the creek widened into a series of shallow pools. Kevin stopped to filter water at one of the pools. Jennifer said she was going to walk approximately 50 yards downstream to check a brushy area where a child might hide. Kevin acknowledged. He watched her walk downstream and begin checking the brush. He returned to his water filtering. He heard her walking through the brush. Then silence. The silence was not alarming. People stop making noise when they are looking carefully at something. Kevin assumed Jennifer had found something to examine. He finished filtering water and packed his filter and walked downstream to rejoin her. Approximately 3 minutes had passed. He found her pack leaning against a boulder. Her radio was on the boulder. Her GPS was beside the radio. Her boots were on a flat rock beside the creek, side by side. Laces still tied. She had slipped out of them. Kevin called her name. No response. He searched the immediate area. Nothing. He radioed for assistance. Teams converged on the location within 40 minutes. Dogs. Additional searchers. Technical teams checking the creek downstream. Jennifer's tracks entered the water at the flat rock where her boots were found. The tracks did not emerge on the other side. The creek at that point was approximately 10 feet wide and 12 inches deep. You could see every stone on the bottom. The search for the missing child was suspended. The search shifted to Jennifer Walsh. 11 days. 120 personnel. The child was eventually found alive, approximately 2 miles from where he had wandered away, by a hiker who was not part of the search. He was dehydrated, but otherwise unharmed. Jennifer Walsh was never found. 50 yards, 3 minutes, a partner within shouting distance, and still the pattern completed. Kevin struggles with what happened. He has replayed those 3 minutes thousands of times. He did not hear Jennifer call for help. He did not hear a struggle. He did not hear anything that would indicate distress. He heard her walking. Then he heard nothing. Then she was gone. He told me he has stopped volunteering for SAR operations. He had been a professional climbing guide in Alaska and Washington State. He had summited Denali 5 times as part of his ranger duties and 3 times as a private climber before that. He was among the most skilled technical climbers in the park service. His rope work was exemplary. His glacier travel was meticulous. His judgment on technical terrain was trusted by every climber who worked with him. On March 8th, he was conducting a routine equipment cache inspection at approximately 11,000 feet on the West Buttress route. The cache contained emergency gear for climbers attempting the standard route to the summit. William's task was to verify the cache contents, check for damage, and report the condition of the surrounding terrain. He radioed from the cache at 10 in the morning. Cache in good condition. All equipment accounted for. Beginning descent. His voice was normal, professional, the voice of a ranger completing a routine assignment. He did not return to base camp. By 3 in the afternoon, when he had not arrived, the base camp coordinator dispatched a team to check the descent route. They found his equipment approximately 1,000 feet below the cache at the edge of a crevasse field. His pack was against a rock outcrop. His radio was on a flat surface beside the pack. His GPS was beside the radio. His ice axe was planted upright in the snow beside the outcrop. His boots were beside the pack, side by side. His crampons were still attached to the boots. He had removed his crampons while he was still wearing the boots, then removed the boots with the crampons attached. The sequence of removal is important. A climber would normally remove crampons before removing boots. William removed boots with crampons attached. His tracks led from the equipment across the crevasse field toward a pressure ridge near a seasonal melt pond that forms in early spring. The tracks showed him walking barefoot on ice and snow. The tracks were steady. No stumbling. No signs that the cold was affecting his gait. The tracks ended at the edge of the pond. The pond was approximately 10 feet across and 2 feet deep, partially frozen. Slushy ice floating on the surface. The crevasse field between his equipment and the pond contained at least 3 major crevasses that William had to cross. His tracks showed him crossing these crevasses without hesitation. No probing, no rope, no protection. Any one of those crevasses could have killed him. A misstep would have dropped him into a slot 20 feet deep with walls that close in below the surface. He would not have been found until the glacier moved his body to the terminus, decades or centuries later. He crossed the crevasses barefoot. He walked across terrain that should have killed him, and it didn't kill him. He reached the pond. William Torres was never found. The mountaineering community in Alaska discussed the case extensively. William Torres was not the type of climber who made mistakes on glaciers. His record was impeccable. His training was exhaustive. He had taught others the glacier travel protocols that he violated on March 8th. Some speculated that he had experienced a psychotic break, that altitude or cold or isolation had triggered a mental state that caused him to abandon his training. But William had been at 11,000 feet hundreds of times. He had spent weeks at higher altitudes without incident. Nothing in his history suggested vulnerability to altitude-induced psychosis. Others speculated that he had seen something that required immediate response. A climber in distress. An emergency that overrode standard protocols. But his radio was with his equipment, turned on, battery full. He could have reported an emergency. He did not. Whatever took William Torres across that crevasse field was not an emergency response. Whatever took him was something that made the danger of the crevasses irrelevant. His tracks led to the pond. His tracks ended at the pond. Whatever he was following was in the water. July 2018, Great Smoky Mountains National Park, Tennessee. Amanda Foster was 29 years old. She had been a wilderness ranger for the National Park Service for 5 years. She had grown up in the mountains of western North Carolina and had spent her childhood hiking, camping, and exploring terrain that most people find intimidating. The Smokies were her home. She knew the drainages, the ridges, the hidden hollows where the forest becomes so dense that sunlight barely reaches the ground. She knew the sounds of the forest and the silences between the sounds. She knew when something was different. On July 9th, she was conducting a routine trail patrol in the Cataloochee Valley. The valley is quieter than other parts of the park, known for its elk herd and its historic buildings, rather than its crowded trails. Amanda preferred it to the busier areas. She liked the solitude. She radioed from a trail junction at 11 in the morning. Normal conditions. Continuing patrol. She did not radio at her scheduled 2 o'clock check-in. By 3:30, her supervisor had dispatched another ranger to check her route. The ranger found her equipment approximately 1 mile from the trail junction. Her pack was leaning against an oak tree. Her radio was on a flat rock. Her GPS was beside the radio. Her boots were on the trail, side by side. The laces were tied in a different pattern than she normally used. Her usual pattern was a loop bow. These were tied in a simple overhand knot. Her tracks led off trail approximately 40 yards to a seasonal creek. The creek was barely flowing, reduced by summer drought to pools connected by trickles. The deepest pool was approximately 8 inches. Amanda Foster's tracks ended at the deepest pool. She was never found. The journal is what stays with me. Amanda kept a personal hiking journal that was found in her pack. The entries were standard observations: weather, wildlife, trail conditions, the routine documentation of a working ranger. The last entry was dated July 8th, the day before her disappearance. She wrote that she had been hearing the creek for the past 3 days, even when she was not in the field. She wrote that she could hear it at home, in her apartment, when she was trying to sleep. She wrote that the sound was getting louder. She wrote that she could identify the specific creek. She knew exactly which creak she was hearing. She wrote that she wanted it to stop. The entry ends there. She wanted it to stop. She walked to the creek. Whether the sound stopped, nobody knows. February 2021. Death Valley National Park, California. Carlos Mendez was 47 years old. He had been a law enforcement ranger for the National Park Service for 12 years. He had worked in Death Valley for 6 years. He was accustomed to extreme heat, limited water, and the disorientation that the desert can cause. On February 3rd, he was conducting a solo patrol of a remote section of the park. Checking on a report of illegal off-road vehicle activity, he parked his patrol vehicle at a pullout and hiked approximately 2 miles to investigate tire tracks that had been spotted by aerial reconnaissance. He radioed at 10 in the morning. Investigating tire tracks. Will report findings. He did not radio again. His equipment was found approximately half a mile from the tire tracks he was investigating. His pack was on the ground. His radio was on a flat rock. His GPS was beside the radio. His duty belt, with weapon, was coiled beside the pack. His boots were on the desert floor, side by side. The sand around them was undisturbed except for his tracks. His tracks led approximately 100 yards to a dry wash. The wash had not contained water for months. It was sand and gravel and dust, the kind of wash that fills suddenly during flash floods and drains within hours. His tracks ended at the center of the dry wash, not at the edge, the center. He walked into the wash and stopped at a specific point, and then he was not anywhere the search could find. The search covered the wash and the surrounding terrain for 2 weeks. Dogs, helicopters, ground teams checking every feature that might hide remains in the desert. Carlos Mendez was never found. The location of the tracks is what investigators cannot explain. He did not walk to the edge of the wash. He walked to the exact center and stopped there, as if the center of a dry wash had some significance, as if water was there even when no water was visible. His colleagues speculated that he had experienced heat-related cognitive impairment. But February in Death Valley is not hot. The temperature that day was approximately 65 degrees. Comfortable, not dangerous. He walked to water that was not there, or water that was there in a way that only he could perceive. A colleague who worked with Carlos told me that Carlos had mentioned the wash approximately 1 week before his disappearance. He had been checking reports in that area and had noticed the wash on the aerial photographs. He told his colleague that the wash looked familiar. He could not explain what he meant. He had never been to that section of the park. He had never seen that wash on the ground, but it looked familiar. It looked like somewhere he had been before. He walked to the center of the wash that looked familiar. He walked to the place he had been before, even though he had never been there. He did not come back. The 11 cases I have presented span 17 years and 10 wilderness areas. The victims include rangers, SAR volunteers, law enforcement officers, EMTs, and wilderness guides. The experience levels range from 5 years to 26 years. The certifications include every type of wilderness training available. None of it mattered. Every one of them walked to water and did not come back. The consistency is what demands attention. 11 different people in 11 different locations following the same pattern. Boots removed and placed side by side. Equipment arranged on flat rocks. Tracks leading to water. Trails ending without explanation. If this were a behavioral phenomenon, a psychological break of some kind, we would expect variation. Different arrangements of equipment. Different orientations of boots. Different distances from equipment to water. Human behavior varies. Even people experiencing the same crisis respond in individual ways. These 11 cases show almost no variation. The pattern is identical, as if the same process was applied to 11 different people, as if something external was controlling the sequence. Place the radio on the rock. Place the GPS beside it. Remove the boots and place them together. Walk to the water. The same steps, the same order, the same ending. Something is taking wilderness professionals using a methodology that does not vary. The victim's training does not affect the outcome. Their equipment does not affect the outcome. Their familiarity with terrain does not affect the outcome. The outcome is determined by the process, and the process appears to be external to the victims. This is the meta-pattern I referenced at the beginning. Not just that professionals disappear, how professionals disappear. The mechanism is visible in the evidence, repeated 11 times without significant variation. Whatever is doing this is efficient. It has developed a process that works. It applies the process without modification, regardless of the victim's credentials. The people who search have become the people who vanish. Their expertise made no difference. The pattern treats experts and amateurs the same way. The water does not care who you are. The water does not care how many rescues you have performed. The water does not care about your certifications or your years of service. The water calls. Some people hear. Some people walk. Nobody walks back. I want to address the context of these disappearances. The cases I have documented exist within a larger history of wilderness disappearance that extends back decades. Some of these historical cases are publicly known. Others remain obscure. Randy Morganson is perhaps the most famous case of a ranger disappearing in the wilderness he knew best. He was a backcountry ranger in Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks for 28 years. In July of 1996, he left his patrol cabin and never returned. His remains were not found for 5 years. When they were discovered in 2001, they were in a remote drainage that Randy had traveled many times before. The circumstances of Randy Morganson's death have never been fully explained. A man who knew the Sierra High Country better than almost anyone alive walked into terrain he knew intimately and died there. The official conclusion suggested accident, but the details fit no clear accident scenario. Randy Morganson is the case that people know. His story was told in a book. He became, in some ways, a symbol of the risks that backcountry rangers accept. But Randy Morganson is not unique. His case fits a pattern that I have now documented across multiple decades and multiple parks. There are other publicly documented cases of wilderness professionals who disappeared under unusual circumstances. Some involve search and rescue personnel who vanished during operations. Some involve rangers who disappeared from terrain they had patrolled for years. Some involve guides who never returned from routes they had traveled dozens of times. These cases exist in public records, but they are not connected. Each is treated as an isolated incident. Each is explained away as accident or misadventure or unknown cause. The pattern is invisible unless you look across cases. I have looked across cases. The pattern is visible. The 11 cases I have documented in detail are representative. They demonstrate the consistency of the pattern across different professionals, different parks, different terrain, different decades. They show that experience does not protect. Equipment does not protect. Training does not protect. The wilderness takes professionals who should be immune to its hazards. It takes them in ways that do not fit conventional explanations. It takes them at water. This is not new. This has been happening for as long as there have been wilderness professionals. The difference now is that someone is documenting it. Someone is connecting the cases. Someone is seeing the pattern. I interviewed a retired SAR coordinator who worked wilderness rescue operations for 31 years. He agreed to speak on condition of anonymity because he still consults for SAR organizations and fears professional repercussions. He told me he has a list. Names of wilderness professionals who disappeared under circumstances that do not fit standard explanations. Names that he has collected over 3 decades. Names that nobody discusses in official channels. His list contains 27 names. More than my documented 19. He has heard about cases that I have not yet found. Cases that were never officially reported as disappearances because the circumstances were too unusual. Cases that were reclassified. Cases that were buried. He told me the SAR community knows about the pattern. They do not discuss it publicly. They do not write about it in journals or present it at conferences. But they know. They call it getting called. He explained. When someone in the SAR community hears about a colleague who disappeared at water, who left their equipment arranged, who walked barefoot to a creek or lake, They say that person got called. The phrase has been in use for at least 2 decades. Nobody knows who started using it. Nobody knows where it came from. Getting called implies something external. It implies that the person did not choose to walk to the water. It implies that the person was summoned, called, brought to the water by something other than their own decision. The phrase is not used lightly. It is not used for every wilderness death. It is used specifically for cases that match the pattern. Equipment arranged, boots removed, water, disappearance. He told me that among veteran SAR personnel, there is an understanding, an unspoken acknowledgement. The work they do puts them in contact with places and patterns that normal people never encounter. The more searches you participate in, the more terrain you cover, the more time you spend in wilderness, the more likely you are to hear the call. He told me that some SAR personnel have reported hearing things, sounds that should not be there, water running where no water exists, voices that might be human and might not be, feelings of being watched in drainages they have searched dozens of times. Most of them dismiss these experiences. They attribute them to stress, fatigue, the psychological toll of constant exposure to tragedy. They continue working. They continue searching. But some of them start talking about retirement. Some of them start reducing their deployments. Some of them quietly step back from SAR work without explanation. He told me the ones who step back are the smart ones, the ones who recognize that something is noticing them and choose to stop being noticed, the ones who keep working, who keep searching, who keep walking into drainages where people have vanished. They are the ones who end up on the list. He himself stopped taking field deployments 5 years before we spoke. He moved to coordination and training. He stopped walking into wilderness. He told me he heard something once, on a search operation approximately 8 years ago, a drainage where a hiker had vanished, water at the bottom of a steep canyon. He was alone, briefly, while his team members were checking a side drainage. He stood at a creek crossing and he heard his name, not shouted, not called from a distance, spoken directly into his ear as if someone was standing beside him. His name, clear, unmistakable. He looked around. Nobody there. He was alone. He heard it again. His name. The same voice. The same intimate proximity. He walked out of that drainage and he never walked into another one. He told his team he was feeling unwell. He returned to base camp. He requested desk duty until the operation concluded. He has not told anyone this story until he told me. He has carried it for 8 years. He told me the call is real. He heard it. He chose not to answer. He believes that choice saved his life. I also interviewed a wilderness medicine physician who has treated SAR personnel for 15 years. She specializes in the physical and psychological health of wilderness rescue workers. She agreed to speak on condition that I not identify her, institution, or her patients. She told me wilderness rescue work produces specific psychological patterns that are not seen in other emergency services. The isolation, the repeated exposure to death in beautiful places, the cognitive dissonance of loving wilderness while witnessing what wilderness does to people. She told me some of her patients report experiences that do not fit standard psychological categories, perceptions that cannot be explained by stress or fatigue or trauma, experiences that persist after rest, experiences that intensify with continued exposure to wilderness. She has patients who report hearing water when no water is present. She has patients who report feeling drawn to specific locations, compelled to return to places where bad things happened. She has patients who report dreams about terrain they have never visited, dreams that turn out to match real locations when they finally encounter them. She does not know what to make of these reports. Standard psychiatric frameworks do not accommodate them. The patients are not psychotic. They are not delusional in any clinical sense. They function normally in all other areas of life. They just hear things. They feel things. They are drawn to places. She told me she has lost 4 patients to wilderness disappearance over her 15-year career. 4 SAR professionals who were under her care, who reported unusual experiences, who eventually walked into wilderness and did not come back. All 4 disappeared at water. All 4 left their equipment arranged. All 4 followed the pattern. She does not discuss these cases publicly. She does not present them at conferences. The implications are too disturbing. A physician acknowledging that her patients reported supernatural experiences before disappearing supernaturally would destroy her career. But she told me. She wanted someone to know. She wanted the connection documented. The experiences precede the disappearances. Her patients reported unusual perceptions before they vanished. They told her about the water they heard, the places they felt drawn to, the voices that called their names. Then they walked to the water and did not come back. She does not know if intervention could have prevented these disappearances. She does not know if recognizing the pattern early could save lives. She only knows that the pattern exists and that she has seen it 4 times. She told me she now asks every SAR patient about unusual experiences. She documents them. She watches for escalation. She has referred patients to desk duty when their reports become alarming. She does not know if this helps. She only knows she has to try. The 11 cases I presented spanned 17 years and 10 wilderness areas. They represent the strongest documentation I have obtained. But they are not the complete picture. I have partial documentation on 8 additional cases. Wilderness professionals who disappeared under similar circumstances, but whose case files I have not been able to fully access. FOIA requests pending. Family members who have not yet agreed to speak. Files that have been sealed or classified for reasons that are not explained. I have anecdotal reports of at least 12 more cases. Names whispered in SAR communities. Stories that circulate but cannot be verified. Disappearances that were officially recorded as accidents, but whose evidence suggests something else. The total number is unknown. The pattern extends further than I can document, further than I may ever be able to document. What I can say with confidence is that wilderness professionals are not immune to whatever is happening in these places. Their training does not protect them. Their equipment does not protect them. Their experience does not protect them. In some ways, their expertise makes them more vulnerable. They spend more time in wilderness than recreational visitors. They return to the same locations repeatedly over years or decades. They develop relationships with specific places. They notice changes that casual visitors would miss. They hear things. They see things. They feel things. And eventually some of them walk to the water and do not come back. I want to discuss the meta-pattern, the pattern within the pattern. Looking at my 11 cases as a group, certain details emerge that are not visible in individual cases. First, the water is always present. Every case involves a creek, river, lake, or pool as the terminal point. Even Daniel Kowalski, who died at a dry creek bed rather than active water, died at a location where water flows during other seasons. The water is the destination. Whatever is happening, it ends at water. The type of water varies. Creeks, rivers, lakes, ponds, pools. Dry washes that carry water only seasonally. Frozen lakes that were once liquid. The form does not seem to matter. Only the presence of water, or the memory of water, or the potential for water. Second, the equipment arrangement is consistent. Boots removed and placed side by side. Radio on a flat rock. GPS beside the radio. Pack leaning against a tree or boulder. The arrangement varies slightly from case to case, but the general pattern is identical. This consistency is disturbing. Different people in different parks at different times should not independently adopt the same arrangement behavior. The arrangement is not a natural human response to anything. It is applied to the victims regardless of their individual habits or training. I have examined the arrangement in detail. The boots are always placed with toes pointing in the same direction. The laces are always loosened, but rarely removed. The radios are always within reach of where the person stood when removing equipment. The arrangement is organized, intentional, not the chaotic abandonment of someone in crisis. Third, the experiences before the disappearances follow a pattern. Daniel saw smoke that was not there. Lisa heard breathing under the ice. Marcus dreamed about a creek. Thomas said hello to something in the forest. Sarah returned to a drainage that felt wrong. Robert heard water that was not real. In every case where I have detailed pre-disappearance information, the person reported some form of unusual perception before they vanished. They heard, they saw, they dreamed, they felt. The perception preceded the action. Something announced itself before it took them. The lead time varies. Some reported unusual experiences weeks before disappearing. Others reported them days before. The pattern suggests a process that engages gradually, building attention over time until the attention becomes action. Fourth, the professional expertise of the victims did not help them. Daniel knew the terrain. Lisa knew the cold. Marcus knew SAR protocols. Thomas knew tactical awareness. Sarah knew technical terrain. None of their expertise mattered. Whatever is doing, this is not deterred by training or equipment or experience. It takes wilderness professionals as easily as it takes casual hikers. In fact, the expertise may make professionals more vulnerable. They spend more time in wilderness. They return to the same locations repeatedly. They develop deeper relationships with specific terrain. They notice changes that casual visitors would miss. They hear things casual visitors would not hear. They feel things casual visitors would not feel. They are more attuned to wilderness, and whatever is in wilderness may be more attuned to them. Fifth, the timing is not random. Many of my cases cluster around certain dates. October appears repeatedly. Early spring appears repeatedly. The transitions between seasons seem to correlate with increased activity. I do not have enough data to establish this statistically, but the clustering suggests that whatever is happening is not constant. It has active periods. It has quiet periods. It follows some kind of cycle that I do not yet understand. The seasonal pattern raises questions about mechanism. What changes between seasons? Water levels change. Snow melts. Ice forms. The relationship between solid ground and flowing water shifts throughout the year. October is when the first hard freezes begin at elevation. Early spring is when the thaw begins. Both are transitional periods when water is moving between states, freezing and melting, flowing and stopping. The cases cluster at transitions, not deep winter when everything is frozen, not high summer when everything is flowing steadily. The edges, the times when water is changing. I do not know what this means. I only know that the pattern is present in the timing. Sixth, the geographic distribution is significant. The cases cluster in certain regions. The Pacific Northwest appears repeatedly. The Sierra Nevada appears repeatedly. The Northern Rocky Mountains appear repeatedly. These are areas with abundant water features, complex terrain, and extensive wilderness. But the pattern is not limited to these regions. Death Valley appears in my cases. The Smokies appear in my cases. The Grand Canyon appears in my cases. The common element is not climate or terrain type. The common element is water and wilderness. Seventh, the recovery rate is 0. In 11 cases spanning 17 years, not one body has been recovered at the water feature where tracks ended. Daniel Kowalski was found at a dry creek bed, seated and dead without apparent cause. But the other 10 walked to water and vanished completely. Water takes bodies. This is known. Drowning victims are found downstream. Flash flood victims are found wedged in debris. But these cases involve shallow water. Water that could not conceal a body. Water that would reveal remains if remains were present. The bodies are not in the water. They are not downstream. They are not hidden by depth or current. They simply are not there. I want to address the official response to these cases. In every case I have documented, the official conclusion was some variant of accident, misadventure, or unknown cause. No investigation reached a conclusion that acknowledged the pattern I have described. This is not a conspiracy. The investigators are not covering anything up. They are applying standard investigative frameworks to evidence that does not fit standard frameworks. When a wilderness professional disappears, the standard assumption is accident, falls, wildlife, medical emergency, weather. The terrain is dangerous, and sometimes dangerous things happen. When the evidence does not support these explanations, the investigation stalls. Falls leave evidence. Wildlife attacks leave evidence. Medical emergencies leave evidence. Weather events are documented. These cases leave no evidence beyond the arranged equipment and the tracks ending at water. There is nothing for investigators to work with, nothing to analyze, nothing to conclude. So they conclude unknown cause and close the file. I have spoken with 3 investigators who worked cases that I documented. All 3 requested anonymity. All 3 acknowledged that the evidence did not support any conventional explanation. One investigator told me that he stopped sleeping well after working one of these cases. He told me that the arranged equipment haunted him, not because it was disturbing in itself, but because it implied a process. Someone arranged that equipment. Either the missing person arranged it themselves, following a pattern that matches other cases they could not have known about, or something arranged it for them. Neither possibility is comfortable. He told me he retired early. He told me the case was part of why. He could not continue investigating in wilderness after seeing what he saw. He could not walk past water features without thinking about tracks that ended at banks. He told me he still does not go into wilderness, not even for recreation, not even with family. He stays in developed areas where water is contained in pipes and pools and fountains, where water doesn't run free. Another investigator told me she requested transfer to urban assignments after working a case in my dataset. She had been a wilderness crime investigator for 12 years. She was good at it. She understood terrain and evidence and the ways that wilderness conceals and reveals. She told me she understood those things until she worked the case. After that, she did not understand anything. She told me the pattern suggested something that her training could not address, something that her experience could not explain, something that operated outside the frameworks she had been given. She told me she transferred because she was afraid, not of what she had seen, of what she might see if she continued. She is still a law enforcement officer. She works gang crimes now, urban violence, human predators she can understand. She told me human predators are easier than whatever is in the wilderness. The third investigator still works wilderness cases. He has worked 3 cases in my dataset. He told me he recognizes the pattern when he sees it. He told me he documents everything now, not for the official file, for himself. He keeps a personal record of cases that match the pattern. He notes the details that do not fit conventional explanations. He has not shared this personal record with anyone in his organization. He told me sharing it would end his career. No one wants to hear that wilderness disappearances follow patterns that cannot be explained. No one wants to hear that trained professionals are being taken by something that training cannot address. He documents because someone needs to, because the pattern deserves to be recorded, even if no one wants to see it. He told me he has 17 cases in his personal file, more than my documented 11. Some of his cases involve civilians rather than professionals, but they follow the same pattern. Equipment arranged, boots removed, tracks ending at water. He told me he does not know if his documentation will ever matter. He does not know if anyone will ever read it. He documents anyway. He told me the pattern is real. He has seen it too many times to doubt. He documents because the pattern deserves to be real on paper, even if no official report will ever acknowledge it. The pattern is visible only when you look across cases. A single disappearance at a single location does not reveal the consistency. You need multiple cases, multiple locations, multiple instances of the same arrangement, the same tracks, the same water. Individual investigators do not have access to this cross-case view. They investigate one case at a time. They see one set of arranged equipment, one set of tracks, one body of water. They do not see the pattern because they are not looking for it. They are not looking for it because no one has told them to look. That is why I am telling you now. The pattern exists. The pattern involves trained professionals who should be immune to wilderness hazards. The pattern ends at water, always at water. Knowing this will not prevent the pattern from continuing. Knowing this will not save the next person who hears the sound of running water where no water runs. Knowing this will not stop the next person who dreams about a creek and then finds the creek and walks to it. But knowing this might help someone recognize the signs. Knowing this might help someone document what they experience before they experience the ending. Knowing this might help someone ask for help before the asking becomes impossible. Information is not protection, but information is better than nothing. And nothing is what we have had until now. I want to address the psychology of what I am describing. Some people will read this and conclude that the wilderness professionals in my dataset experienced psychological breaks, that stress, isolation, fatigue, or underlying mental health conditions caused them to behave irrationally, that the pattern I describe is the pattern of human psychological failure, not the pattern of something external. This is a reasonable interpretation. It is the interpretation that official investigators prefer. It requires no extraordinary explanation. It fits within existing frameworks of human behavior under stress. I considered this interpretation extensively. I wanted it to be true. I wanted the pattern to have a conventional explanation, but the interpretation has problems. First, the consistency. 11 people in 10 wilderness areas over 17 years independently adopted the same arrangement behavior. They all placed boots side by side. They all arranged equipment on flat rocks. They all walked to water. If this were psychological break, we would expect variation. Different people break differently. Their behaviors would reflect their individual histories, their specific stresses, their unique psychologies. These 11 people behaved identically. The pattern does not vary by person. It varies only in the specific water feature involved. Second, the precursor experiences. In every case where I have detailed information, the person reported unusual perceptions before disappearing. They heard sounds. They saw things. They dreamed about locations. If this were psychological break, the perceptual disturbances would be symptoms of the break. They would occur shortly before the crisis behavior. They would be part of the acute episode. But in several of my cases, the perceptual experiences occurred weeks before the disappearance. Daniel Kowalski saw smoke 2 weeks before he walked to the drainage. Marcus Rivera dreamed about the creek for weeks before he walked to it. Robert Vasquez heard water for 2 weeks before he walked to the creek. The perceptual experiences were not acute symptoms. They were precursors. Something was engaging with these people long before they walked to the water. Something was preparing them. Third, and that the evidence is consistent with something other than pure human psychology. I want to share something that I have not shared with anyone except the families I interviewed. I have experienced the phenomenon myself. In September of 2023, I visited a drainage where one of my documented cases occurred. I was conducting site research, trying to understand the terrain, trying to see what the missing person had seen. I was alone. This was a mistake, and I knew it was a mistake, but I made it anyway. I told myself I needed to experience the location without the interference of other people. I told myself I would be careful. I found the location where the equipment was recovered. I found the trail that led to the water. I walked the trail to the creek. The creek was small, maybe 6 feet wide, shallow enough to see every stone on the bottom. The water was clear and cold. Nothing remarkable. I stood at the bank and I listened. I heard the water moving over the stones. I heard birds in the trees behind me. I heard my own breathing. And then I heard something else. A sound beneath the water sound. Not louder than the water. Underneath it. Like a frequency that existed below the audible range, but somehow reached my awareness anyway. I cannot describe the sound accurately. It was not quite a hum, not quite a pulse. It was rhythmic in a way that suggested breathing, in and out, but not human breathing. Something larger, something that breathed on a scale, that made human breathing look like a flutter. I felt drawn to the water, not compelled, not pulled, drawn. The way you are drawn to look at something beautiful, the way you lean toward something interesting. I wanted to step into the creek. I wanted to walk to the center where the water was deepest. I wanted to stand there and listen more closely. I recognized what was happening. I turned around and walked away from the creek. I did not run. Running felt wrong. I walked steadily back to the trail, back to the road, back to my vehicle. I drove away, and I did not return. I do not know what would have happened if I had stepped into the creek. I do not know if I would have removed my boots and placed them on the bank. I do not know if I would have walked deeper and then not been anywhere the search could find. I only know that I heard something. I felt something. I wanted something. And I chose not to follow the wanting. I have asked myself many times since then whether I am different from the 11 professionals in my cases, whether something about me allowed me to turn away when they could not. I do not think I am different. I think I was lucky. I think I recognized the signs because I had been researching the pattern for years. I knew what to watch for. I knew what the phenomenon looked like from the outside. They did not know. They walked into familiar terrain and heard something new, and did not have the framework to understand that hearing something new was dangerous. I had the framework. The framework saved me. Or maybe the phenomenon was not ready for me. Or maybe I am telling myself a story to feel safe. I do not know. I know only that the sound under the water was real. The breathing was real. The draw toward the center of the creek was real. I experienced what they experienced. I just experienced less of it. Or I experienced it at an earlier stage. Or I got lucky in ways I cannot understand. I do not visit sites alone anymore. I do not walk to water features without other people present. I do not stay in drainages longer than necessary. I am still investigating. I am still documenting. But I am more careful now. I know the phenomenon is real because I have felt it. I want to address something that the families of these 11 professionals have asked me not to overlook. These were good people, dedicated people, people who chose careers protecting others in wilderness, people who spent years learning skills that they used to bring lost hikers home, to rescue injured climbers, to recover bodies so families could bury their dead. Daniel Kowalski spent 19 years maintaining trails and responding to emergencies in the Sierra Nevada. He taught younger rangers how to navigate difficult terrain. He wrote safety manuals. He was the person other rangers called when situations became complicated. Lisa Chen spent 8 years patrolling some of the most remote terrain in the Olympic Mountains. She skied into places where no one else would go. She carried medical supplies to campers who needed help. She documented wildlife and weather and trail conditions so that others could travel safely. Marcus Rivera spent 26 years volunteering for search and rescue operations. He did not get paid. He showed up because people needed to be found. He trained hundreds of volunteers. He saved lives. Thomas Brennan spent 14 years as a law enforcement ranger after serving his country in the military. He protected parks from crime. He helped visitors who were lost or injured. He maintained order in wild places where order is difficult to maintain. Sarah Mitchell spent 6 years responding to emergencies in the Grand Canyon. She descended into dangerous terrain to extract injured climbers. She carried medical supplies where helicopters could not reach. She did the difficult work that most people cannot imagine. Robert Vasquez spent 23 years coordinating search and rescue operations. He managed hundreds of searches. He brought people home to their families. He trained the people who now search for others. Peter Danforth patrolled the most remote areas of Yellowstone for 8 years. He checked on wilderness travelers. He documented conditions. He maintained a presence in country where most people never go. Jennifer Walsh volunteered for search and rescue operations for 9 years while working as a nurse. She gave her free time to finding lost people. She used her medical skills to help people who were injured in wilderness. William Torres climbed Denali 8 times as ranger and guide. He taught others to climb safely. He checked equipment caches that saved climbers' lives. He worked in conditions that would defeat most people. Amanda Foster patrolled the Smokies for 5 years. She knew the mountains where she grew up. She protected the forest she loved. Carlos Mendez enforced the law in one of the harshest environments in the park system. He worked in extreme heat. He worked in isolation. He protected Death Valley. They did not die in ways that make sense. They did not die in ways that allow their service to be honored with simple explanations. They walked to water and did not come back. The families have asked me to say that this does not diminish their service, that whatever happened to these 11 professionals does not reflect failure on their part. They did not make mistakes. They did not ignore their training. They did not do anything wrong. Something happened to them that training cannot prevent. Something happened that equipment cannot stop. Something happened that experience cannot anticipate. They deserve to be remembered for their service, not for how they disappeared. Their families want them remembered as the people they were. The friend who would help you move furniture on his day off. The sister who called every Sunday. The husband who made pancakes on Saturday mornings. The daughter who sent postcards from every patrol. The uncle who taught you to fish. The mother who read you stories about wilderness adventure. The patterns I document are real. The disappearances happened. But the people inside those patterns were more than their final moments. They were lives, full lives, lives that ended in ways that make no sense. Remember the pattern, but remember the people. They mattered. They still matter. They will always matter. What should you do with this information? If you work in search and rescue, you should know that you are not immune to the pattern. Your training does not protect you. Your equipment does not protect you. Your experience does not protect you. The wilderness you have walked for years knows you. It has noted your presence. It has watched you respond to disappearances. It may be waiting. Pay attention to what you perceive. If you hear things that should not be there, document them. Tell someone. Do not dismiss unusual experiences as stress or fatigue. If you hear water where no water should be, pay attention. If the sound persists. If the sound grows louder. If the sound follows you home. These are warning signs. If you feel drawn to specific locations, especially locations where disappearances have occurred, be cautious. The pull is part of the pattern. Recognizing it may give you the opportunity to resist it. If you dream about terrain you have never visited, note the details. If you later encounter that terrain in reality, be extremely careful. Consider not entering. Consider asking for a different assignment. If you experience any of these things, tell someone before you walk into wilderness again. Tell your partner. Tell your supervisor. Tell your family. Create a record. Create accountability. Make sure someone knows what you are experiencing, so that if you disappear, your experience is documented. I am not saying you should stop doing SAR work. The work is important. People need to be found. People need to be rescued. The wilderness needs professionals who know how to operate in it. But you should operate with awareness that something in the wilderness may be operating on you. You should maintain vigilance, not just for the dangers you were trained to handle, but for dangers that no training addresses. Work in pairs when possible. Maintain radio contact. Check on each other frequently. Do not let anyone wander off alone to check something quickly. 3 minutes was all it took for Jennifer Walsh. If you feel the pull, if you hear the sound, if you see the water that should not be there, do not follow. Turn around. Walk away. Report what you experienced. It may not help. The 11 professionals in my cases could not walk away. Maybe by the time you feel the pull, walking away is no longer possible. But try anyway. Try because there is nothing else to try. Try because knowing what is happening might give you one more second of resistance. Tell your colleagues. Tell your coordinators. Tell your families. Let people know where you are, what you are doing, what you are experiencing. The professionals who vanished did not know they were targets. They walked into familiar terrain and never came back. They did not have the information you now have. You have the information. What you do with it is your choice. If you are a family member of someone who disappeared in wilderness under circumstances that match this pattern, I want to hear from you. Your loved one may be part of a larger picture that deserves to be documented. I know this is painful. I know you have already answered questions from investigators who could not explain what happened. I know you have already wondered if there was something you could have done differently. There was not. Nothing you did or did not do caused this. Nothing could have prevented this. But your information might help document the pattern. Your information might help someone else recognize the signs. Your information might someday contribute to understanding that currently does not exist. If you are an investigator who has worked cases that do not fit standard explanations, I want to hear from you. Your observations may connect to patterns that extend beyond your jurisdiction. You may have information that, combined with other information, reveals something that cannot be seen from a single case. I will protect your identity. I will not share information in ways that would compromise your career. I understand the professional risk of acknowledging that some cases cannot be explained, but the pattern needs to be documented by people who have seen it from the investigator's perspective. Your voice matters. If you are a wilderness professional who has experienced unusual perceptions but has not disappeared, I especially want to hear from you. You may be a survivor. Your experience may contain information about why some people walk and others do not. What made you turn back? What made you recognize the danger? What broke the spell before you walked to the water? Survivors may hold the key to understanding the pattern. Survivors may know something that the missing cannot tell us. Contact information is in the description. Everything shared will be treated with discretion. Names can be changed. Identifiable details can be obscured. What matters is the documentation. I want to end with something that happened after I completed most of my research. I received an email from a woman in Oregon. She had heard about my investigation through a mutual contact in the SAR community. She wanted to tell me about her husband. Her husband was a wilderness ranger for 16 years. He retired 3 years ago. He is still alive, but he almost was not. She told me that approximately 4 years before his retirement, her husband began having experiences that match the pattern I have documented. He started hearing water, not constantly at first, occasionally, a creek running somewhere that he could not locate, a sound that would appear and disappear without pattern. He dismissed it as tinnitus or stress or the accumulated noise of years working near streams and rivers. He continued working. The sound became more frequent, more persistent, more specific. He could identify the creek he was hearing. It was a creek in his patrol area, a creek where a hiker had drowned 3 years earlier. He had recovered that hiker's body. He remembered the drainage. He remembered the sound of the water. He was hearing that specific water in his head. He started dreaming about the creek. In the dreams, he would walk to the water and stand at the bank and look down. In the dreams, something was looking back at him from under the surface. He could never see what it was. He only knew it was there. He told his wife about the dreams. He told her about the sound. She suggested he talk to a therapist. He saw a therapist for 6 months. The therapist diagnosed anxiety and prescribed medication. The medication did not help. The sound continued. The dreams continued. He started feeling pulled toward the drainage. When he was on patrol, he would find himself walking toward that creek, even when his route should have taken him elsewhere. He would catch himself and redirect, but the pull was there. He told his supervisor he needed a different patrol area. His supervisor asked why. He could not explain. He asked to be reassigned anyway. His supervisor reassigned him. The pull did not stop. The creek was calling him even from a different drainage. The sound was louder now. The dreams were more frequent. He realized he was going to walk to that creek eventually. He realized he would not be able to stop himself. He realized he was being called. He retired. He moved to a different state. He moved to eastern Oregon, to high desert country where the creeks are few and far between. He moved as far from the drainage as he could get while staying in the region where his family lived. The sound stopped. The dreams stopped. He has not heard the creek in 3 years. He does not know if it is waiting for him to return or if moving away broke the connection. He does not intend to find out. He is one of the ones who stepped back, one of the ones who recognized what was happening and chose to stop being noticed, one of the ones who survived because he refused to answer the call. His wife told me he does not talk about it. He does not think about it. He has built a new life in the desert, far from water, far from the terrain that almost took him. But she wanted me to know. She wanted someone to document that survival is possible, that recognizing the signs can save you. that the call can be refused if you refuse early enough. She does not know if this is true for everyone. She does not know if her husband was lucky or strong, or just not far enough along in the process. She only knows that he heard the call, and he did not walk. He is still alive. If you are hearing something that you cannot explain, this may be your only window. The retired coordinator heard his name once and walked away. The ranger in Oregon heard the creak for months and moved away. They survived. The 11 professionals in my cases heard things too. They did not walk away. They walked toward. The difference between survival and disappearance may be nothing more than the choice to turn around, the choice to refuse, the choice to run. Make the choice while you still can. This is Case 0, 11 wilderness professionals, 17 years, 10 wilderness areas, the same pattern, the same boots placed side by side, the same equipment arranged, the same tracks ending at water. The people who search have become the people who vanish. I have documented what I can document. I have interviewed the people who would speak. I have visited the sites where the evidence was found. I have walked the trails that ended at water. I do not know why this happens. I do not know how this happens. I do not know what is in the water that calls people to it. I do not know why trained professionals are not immune. I do not know why the pattern is so consistent. I know only that it happened 11 times that I can document, and the documentation is consistent. The water called them. They walked. The water may call others. Others may walk. But some have heard and refused. Some have recognized the signs and stepped back. Some have survived. You have the information now. You know what to watch for. You know the warning signs. You know that the call can be refused if you refuse early enough. If you hear water that is not there, tell someone. If you dream about terrain you have never visited, tell someone. If you feel drawn to a specific drainage, tell someone. If you see things that others do not see, tell someone. If you feel watched in drainages where you have worked for years, tell someone. Document what you experience. Create a record. Make sure someone knows. And if the time comes to choose between walking toward and walking away, remember the ones who walked away. Remember that survival is possible. Remember that the call is not a command. It is an invitation you can decline. The professionals who came before you did not know they were targets. Now you know. What you do with that knowledge is up to you. The investigation continues.